right. Welcome to Mimosas in the morning. Let's give it a couple of minutes, let some people get on, and we will start the show. Let's get our commenting apps. Oh. All right. Welcome. Hey, we got some people. Let's throw some waves out. What's up, Brandon? What's up, Elise? Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mimosas in the Morning, special Sunday edition. Here, cheers. Got a little coffee today, too. Gonna say what's up. What's up, Vic? Throw some waves out there. Cool. So we give a couple minutes, let some people come in. I'm gonna set up my page here so I can start commenting with you guys, throw some stuff out. Let me know if you can hear me while I'm using the headphones today. What's up? Give me a little thumbs up there if all of audio sounds okay. Let's just keep updating till we can get commenting on the live. Let's do another page here. There we go. Alrighty. Cool. Thanks, Brandon. Alrighty. Alrighty. So now we can comment. We can throw some stuff up in there. So again, welcome to Mimosas in the Morning. Got a special guest, Jason Vasquez, coming on today. Good friend of mine, really nice guy. We are going to talk about mental health during the pandemic and different ways to stay just kind of sane through all the craziness that's going on, how to take care of yourself, and how to live your best life a little bit. So before we have Jason on, I did want to talk about everything that's going on in the world right now, specifically with the protests. There's Jason, what's up? With everything that's going on around the country. There's dozens of cities, there's lots of protests and things going on. So I normally do in this portion, we talk about a little bit of a topic, and I do like pandemic product of the week and some fun stuff. Hey Kathy, how you doing? Welcome. But I feel a lot of different things. I feel it is my duty as well. I've been pulling in how I've been, or taking in a lot of information about what's going on through different news sources, national and international. And I think it is, as a white, straight, privileged man, I can't just sit here and be like, let's talk about fun pandemic stuff. These are the games we play. This is the stuff we do. I feel it's just like it's a slap in the face to the protesters, to the African American community, to people that have lost their lives. And it's not what, we should be doing right now. I understand that sometimes you gotta have fun, you gotta do things, which we will later on in the show get into. But I wanted to take my platform and my opportunity right now to speak on some things that can help protesters, to keep you safe, to speak to some of the injustices in our, right now, authoritarian police state, which is extremely tragic to have that associated with America, even though really if you look back at the history, it's not something that's new. I train a lot of police officers. I train people in de-escalation tactics, how to verbally de-escalate, how to, when you can't do that anymore, how to, as peacefully as possible, to subdue and control people. And it's a shame to see, it's not even stuff that should be used, things that are just atrocious and coming from awful people. So there's a couple of things I wanted to kind of talk about, and more on the safety side for protesters, as well as some other things that I find that are appalling that are happening right now. But first, so I wanted to talk about first thing is a list of things to do if you're going out and protesting, things that can keep you safe. Let me just fix the camera here real quick. There we go. A couple things you should absolutely be doing. Coming from somebody who's been tear gassed and pepper sprayed, it sucks. It is not pleasant, not fun at all. It's very painful, and something that you don't realize about it is any part of your skin, anywhere there's a mucous membrane, especially mucous membranes, but even in your pores, on your skin, anywhere it burns. It doesn't feel good. It feels like a really, really bad sunburn, but that won't go away. But then when it gets to your mucous membranes, your nose, your eyes, your mouth, you inhale it, goes into your lungs. It's debilitating. You feel like you can't breathe. It burns. You start to like, so much mucus is coming out of your nose that it gets to a point where you're obstructed in your breathing. You can't do anything. So a couple little tips and tricks, at least on the tear gas side, if you're out there and you're protesting in places. Again, really good PPE, so proper protective equipment is important. I know PPE has been thrown out there a bunch recently, but it's important to say in these contexts of protesting and doing stuff to keep yourself safe. Face mask, face shield, important. There are rubber bullets, there are things being thrown. Protect your eyes, really important. Something you may or may not have at home, goggles, if you do any like snowboarding or skiing, can be a good layer of protection for your eyes. You still have good visibility, but protect you from getting sprayed. Sometimes those, though, as well, have tiny little air holes in them to let airflow come through, so when they fog up they go out. And they also have their outer edges of them are generally like soft foam and cushion that'll actually soak up the pepper spray stuff, so it'll stop the initial spray of things getting into your eyes, but over that they're not going to be useful after more. So it's a basic thing you can do. Wear glasses, wear something in there. Don't wear contacts. If you wear contacts, it gets in your eyes, it gets stuck, it irritates, and it actually is on the lens. You have to take them out, lose it, and then rinse your eyes. Something you guys may have at home if you're out there and protesting, swim goggles, things that you use in the pool that create a tight water-like seal, a watertight seal, are the best. Full face mask, like over the nose, will be the best for pepper spray. But remember, you need to cover your nose and your mouth as well to protect from you inhaling and things going inside your lungs, because that'll really, really obstruct you, and it takes you quite some time to get that out. Very simple little thing you can do to have and protect your eyes if you're out in there. Also, with debris being thrown around, things being pushed, stuff getting tossed, just protect your face. It's the most important. Another thing you could do, wear long sleeve, long pants. Don't let any skin be out. Wear gloves. Cover as much of your skin as possible, because if there is an environment where you're in with pepper spray or tear gas, OC, CS, like it's, you want to make sure that you are covered as much as possible. It does two things. One, if you have any identifying tattoos or scars or anything like that, if you get recorded doing anything, you don't want that to be out there in the world. So covering up is great, but also covering up to protect against any irritants that can get on the skin and burn. Cotton is really good. Cotton washes better. Also, cotton, if it does for some reason catch fire, it burns cleaner than having like Under Armour type materials. Those will melt and actually stick to your skin. So again, cotton, long sleeve, no identifying markings, things that are consistent and smooth, without no designs, just plain black or green or whatever color you want to wear, just nothing. Again, protect your face. A backwards cap is always good. It protects the back of your neck. If you have the cap and the bill down low, you can still cover your eyes, nose, and mouth from the front. Hearing protection is always good if things get really loud, so you can earplugs or something else that goes in. Oh, my wife is in. What's up, Vikram? And protect there. So we're talking about tear gas, OC spray, pepper spray, things like that. So make sure that you really take care of all major mucous membranes. Big thing too, at the end of the day, don't get arrested, don't do anything. You go home, when you rinse off, cold showers, no hot at all. Hot water's open your pores. That helps that residual stuff that's in your hair or that's in your beard or wherever else that's still in your body, when it rinses off, it'll go back into your pores. Water makes it worse. It's going to make it way worse. So cold shower, rinse everything, and make sure that you're not letting things get back into your eyes. So just as safety goes in, when you're out there, backpack, have a quarter gallon or a quart of milk with you. Something that is not water. Water aggravates it, especially when you're out. So you pour it on there, it starts to burn worse. So you could actually use liquid antacid, milk. Milk is easy to get. It's simple. Get a gallon of it, pour it on your face. It'll help things to be a little bit better. A couple other things. Yeah, safety in numbers. Stay with your friends. Stay with a group of people. Stay around together. Don't let yourself get stuck by yourself. You can get separated. There are a couple of tactics that most police forces use. Some I agree with, some I don't agree with, where they have plainclothes officers inside your ranks as protesters. They'll be in there. The NYPD uses armbands of a different color for every day to identify police officers that are undercover, basically. There are goods and bads of that, and I'll talk about both kind of sides of that as some information for people to have if you're going out and you're in Brooklyn and you're protesting and going out. If the police officer involved that is an undercover you see is doing their job appropriately, you shouldn't know they're there. They shouldn't be rioting. They should not be instigating or pressuring people to do things worse or turn to violence, which is absolutely happening all over the country in different places. There are undercover police officers that are being instigating to justify their actions towards protesters, which is absolutely 100% wrong and a travesty and just bullshit, honestly. You have officers that are doing it the correct way and appropriately blending in and going in should be, dissuading people from violence. That being said, when I'm talking about that, I'm not saying that people looting or getting angry or breaking windows is in any way at this point wrong. To me, it's a reaction to something that's been happening and bubbling over for a very long time when you have an administration that is completely clueless, but also just falling on deaf ears for any of the cries for these people that are being killed. It's awful. It's absolutely, I think, justified now. I'm sorry, businesses have business insurance for this very reason. Things happen, it sucks, it's bad, but you're going to recoup your losses on whatever it is, and you're going to be able to reopen again or do something for most cases. But I think one of the major things is you have systemic racism, and you have all these people that feel disenfranchised that can't be heard, and you have to lash out at some point. It gets to a point where you can't just sit by and say, oh, well, you have to protest peacefully. This is the way it has to be. You have to do this. As the tiniest example, you had peaceful protests. You had Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, as peaceful as could be. Even before he did it, he asked members of special forces, people in the military, like, how should I do this? And the recommendation from some special forces members was just take a knee. You're still kneeling. People kneel all the time for fallen service members, for other things. You take a knee in respect, but also you can take a knee to make a point, which I think is as peaceful as can be when you have, a protest specifically against this, and you have a total hypocritical, administration where the vice president is now tweeting, you must do this, be peaceful, don't do these things, we would like it if you were peacefully protesting, who at the same time was at a football game where Colin Kaepernick took a knee and he stood up and walked out. So, not a good look. Y'all can go. We all know how I feel about Trump and Pence, so we don't have to. They just suck. They're the worst, and I hope they all don't get elected back in. So again, going back into there, another thing that beware of if you're protesting, don't bring your phone, don't bring credit cards, don't bring anything that can track you to the place that's there. If you want to bring your phone, shut off data, shut off Wi-Fi, shut off your touch ID or your facial ID, so you only have to have the ability to put in a PIN code to access it. That way you have legal rights, so they can't get into your phone. Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. It's you're never going to be good enough sometimes for certain people, because their actions, that what they want is they don't want you to protest in general at all, because they don't care about the well-being of the people that are protesting or being, pushed down and not allowed to, live the American dream, which is supposed to be, prosperity and freedom. They want these, the current administration people that are these white power people, like, go, I can't even get on that. That is just like, it's too much. We'll spend the whole hour of me just bitching on my show. That you couldn't protest. You could take a knee, you could literally lie down, you can go to a hunger protest, you could have people doing whatever. It's never going to be good enough for some people because ultimately they don't care. All they really want is their way of life to stay the same. They want to oppress and push other people down, and they're not going to listen. So sometimes you got to riot. Sometimes things have to take the next step, and you have to escalate. And in a self-defense situation, you de-escalate as much as possible. You stay as peaceful as long as you can. But when it gets to that point where you're pushed and you cannot go any further, you have to continue to fight. Yeah, sometimes it turns to violence. It's happened to me in my life in self-defense situations. This is no different. These are people that have been pushed to a breaking point that continually for a very, very, very long time. This isn't like one or two instances. This is hundreds and hundreds of instances over the course of the entirety of the United States being a country. So there's been a lot of patience, I believe, on the side of people that have, been oppressed. So I think this is a thing where it's a long time coming, and now it's happening. In the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a crazy, crazy year. So again, the one thing I really want to just also nail out here is there are a lot of people that are not a part of the protests, that don't care about the cause, that are taking the ability to go out and wreak havoc and mayhem, that are coming back down onto the protesters, which is awful. In Minnesota, there's already the police officers, Minnesota State Police Force has already put out documents and statements as to saying that there are white nationalist groups that are infiltrating, that are going in under the guise of supporting this, but in reality all they're doing is instigating violence, breaking windows of businesses, burning things down, flipping cars. There's a few videos that I've already seen, not a few, 10, 12, 13, 14, a lot of videos I've already seen of a lot of peaceful protesters, people of color, women, men as well, white dudes as well. I mean, like, a lot of people peacefully protesting, want their voice to be heard, doing things, however, and people protesting and rioting and doing all sorts of stuff. But an overwhelming, in certain areas, groups of people that are not there to do the right thing. There's a lot of anarcho, white supremacist groups of people that are coming in that have been instigated by the current political administration to push out on MAGA nights and go out and do things that are inappropriate, to incite violence so the police can have an even more reason to have an aggressive response. I've seen videos from San Jose, from California, where police officers are standing on lines, jacking themselves up, getting all pumped and ready to go, and they're just like beating their chest and they want it, which is inappropriate. You're here to protect and serve. When I train police officers, it's the first thing we talk about is what is the reason why you're serving and what are you doing. I took an oath as a Marine to defend the Constitution and defend the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And they're domestic enemies. There are people that are out here that are not supporting the right for every person to be equal, and it's atrocious. It's awful, and I think that people should recognize that it's okay for me to say, hey, I have a lot of police officer friends and I support them, but if you are not, as a police officer, condemning the actions of other people that are bad and not doing their job appropriately, then you're part of the problem. I, as a white heterosexual cisgender male, if I don't support my LGBTQ friends, I don't support my my friends that don't look like me, that are of other race, and I don't use my platform to speak out on it, what does that say about me? That I'm part of the problem, that I'm complicit, and I'm just sitting here letting things happen when it's other people are out there dying. It's that's not what I took my oath for. That's not what I stand for. It's something it's a shame that people don't necessarily do. And I know a lot of people feel helpless, like they're like, what do I do? Listen to your friends, listen to your black friends, listen to your Latino friends, listen to your people that have to experience this all the time and don't talk. There are a lot of resources out there on how to understand what's going on, but I think the biggest thing you could do is be an advocate and an ally, not just share posts on Instagram, but try and if you can, donate to the protesters, bail funds in these different states. if you can, stand up for your friends. It's the little things on day to day. It's the things that you aren't going to get praised for on Instagram because you posted a video of you doing something cool. It's the, hey, you're with a group of friends and somebody makes an insensitive remark about, or some racist or sexist or homophobic remark, and then nobody says anything. Be that person that stands up and says, yo, dude, that's not right. You need to check yourself, and this is why it's not right. And if you can't do that, you need to leave or you need to learn. So it's these little things that I think are very important. A couple little things as well for just a quick rundown on notes for protesters on staying safe in these difficult and scary protests. I made some notes because then I tend to go off on tangents and stuff. Remember, watch out for the people that are around you. Stay with friends, stay with the group. Make friends with the people that are in your protest, that are actually actively trying to protest and do the right thing, that are there for the right cause. Check on the people that aren't. Say, hey, why are you actually here? What are you doing? Maybe they're undercover UCs or police officers. Maybe they are white nationalists, anarchists that are just there to break things and do stuff. Just be aware. Don't go in blindly because bad things can happen, and keep yourself and the other protesters safe. Work as a group in it together. Again, make sure you have a plan for emergencies. Where are the nearest hospitals? Do you have somebody else that can assist you? Have a backpack with, gauze, milk, backup shirts and clothing in case you need it. Things if you have to ditch it, if things get torn or burned, or have pepper spray on it. Backup clothing. Don't bring any credit cards, anything that could be linked or traced you to any places. Bring cash, just your ID in case you do get arrested. If you don't bring your phone, use a Sharpie permanent, write it on your skin underneath the long sleeves, phone numbers that you may need if you don't have them memorized for loved ones or for other people in case you go to jail or whatever happens. You got to be prepared and ready. So just be safe. Just be safe. It's all sparked with the violence against George Floyd, and it's atrocious, and the things that are coming out on very specifically the Republican or GOP side, and people that I've seen that are, laughing at it and doing absolutely awful videos online. They're wrong. You're in the right if you're protesting. If you're protesting and this has happened so long, stay the course and stay strong. Not everybody is in a place where they can do that, and that's understandable, but if you can spread the news, if you can continue to donate or get other people in on the fight, it's important, so do that. So on that, we will, after my almost 23-minute rant, I was going to get Jason on here 10 minutes ago, but let's change gears a little bit. We're going to bring Jason on and talk about mental health. We're going to talk about how to stay sane and live your best life during the pandemic and during all these things that are happening. How can you cope with, and how can you really just, do not just your body, but your mind a favor in dealing with all the stresses and things that are going on right now. So I'm going to bring Jason on here. Got you. For this. Yeah, Kathy, thanks. Again, if you guys have any questions on staying safe during protests or doing stuff, I have like a huge list of stuff that I kind of wrote down. I don't know if I really got to talk about all of it with Hypnose. So again, write comments into the DM me or comments into here, and we will definitely be able to have you on going in. Jason.
Hello, how you doing, good sir?
Good.
Hello.
How you doing?
So far, so good. Maintaining.
I hear you. I know. We're just like living it. You're in Brooklyn right now, right?
That's correct, sir. Down in Bay Ridge.
Yeah. How are things going for you guys there? Are any of the protests leaking into your area? Or
surprisingly quiet, I gotta say. It was unexpectedly, given that, and it's a little bit strange. We usually have a million different ambulances, cop cars, and fire trucks going by regularly, but I haven't heard any protesting going on around in this area.
Okay. You guys are pretty far out there too, so I can.
Yeah, we're at the bottom of Brooklyn. You're right.
Yeah. Everyone's up near Barclays and hitting up the Park Slope area.
Probably. Oh yeah, the nicer areas are getting a little bit more busy, I gotta say.
Yeah, that's okay. That's good. That's good for you guys in your area.
Yeah, fortunately, and the hospital doesn't get overrun either, which is nice.
Yeah, that's good. Have a little bit of space there. So just a little bit about Jason. Jason and I have known you for what now? 6 years, 5 years, something like that.
want to say 6, but I'm not sure. 6 years ago was what, 2013?
Something, yeah, 2014. No, I think
2014,
maybe
yes.
5.5 years. Anyway, something like that. When Maddie and I got
Good amount of time.
so,
A good amount of time. I've really
yeah,
got to know you a bit nowadays.
yeah. We did meet at Maddie's birthday party once, like years before that, and
That's
then
right.
I know
Oh,
on that rooftop of the Pod Hotel or whatever.
that's the
Yes,
one I remember, actually, the rooftop one.
yes, that's the only one I remember because all the other ones had a little too much fun. So,
It happens, man. I'm a big violator of that, I hate to say.
oh yeah, I'm like, what night was that again? No, so a little bit too. We're going on. You're the manager of a psych unit or psych ward at one of the hospitals. And you're in Brooklyn, correct? Is where you're working?
That's correct, sir. An inpatient, locked inpatient unit.
Okay. Yeah. So you always, I hear some of the things that go on in different places and stuff that goes on,
Yep.
and things you have to deal with on a daily basis, which is it's crazy. And it's like,
I hate to say it's the deepest connection between you and I, because nonviolent de-escalation is a big component of my job as well. A huge component of my job as well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine. Obviously, you're trying to take care of people who are not necessarily in their right minds, clearly, and aren't thinking directly. It's like if you're having a conversation with somebody who's totally sane and normal, you can just pretty much be like, "Yo, knock it off, let's do this." But now, most of the time, unless they're not totally in the right mind. But
Yeah.
it's crazy that nonviolent de-escalation is a serious. Everyone should learn a little bit, even just in your day-to-day life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My close friend Nigel, he's been huge on reading a lot of these books discussing nonviolent communication, where that nonviolent de-escalation starts at the very beginning with each word you choose and how you choose to use it, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. Has he read? Do you know if he's talked about sorry, I went to start drinking the mimosas, all the bubbles come up, and then I end up burping for the second half of the show. So
I avoided the bubbles this time, I hate to say.
I was like, I mix it with the coffee to make it like usually go down. But conflict communication is
Yes.
a book. It's honestly, it's really great. It's the same author that does Meditations on Violence. And he is a corrections officer down in Maryland. He actually does this study on it's an interesting, because you can definitely tell he has a little more right-leaning, but
Yeah.
his inferences and things he pulls from his job and different psychologists and psychiatrists that they've worked with on how to de-escalate and not have to go to violent confrontations in these types of places where you're really there to serve and or protect and or have the well-being of your patients in mind. It's interesting. If you haven't seen it, conflict communication, I use it a lot in my day-to-day life. It's not even a big book.
I really do.
It's pretty thin, but it's like,
oh, great.
It's boring and
I am excited to jump on something. The more I can learn about that, the better I think I'm going to be able to handle these situations, which is what I'm looking for at the end of the day, honestly, on every single front.
Yeah. Well, you guys too have, correct me if I'm wrong, there's certain, like, for healthcare workers, rules and regulations and laws that are preventing you guys from necessarily going hands-on and or limits the extent at which you can do things too. So, I mean, what do you guys
Absolutely.
have?
There's a lot of deep restrictions that go with that. Even to how we speak to the patient while we're doing it. We have to be sure to convey a non-punishment approach whenever we're dealing with these kinds of situations.
Yeah. So what are a couple of things maybe, let's say we're dealing with I'm trying to think of non-Republican related things, but I was like an annoying person that won't give up their point of view. Anyway, thinking of, let's just say a loved one or family member, maybe, or somebody you just met and you're trying to talk to them, and they're coming off confrontational and aggressive. Maybe what are some things that you use with patients and or you've noticed in your day-to-day life that are good to maybe share? Somebody can think about this in a situation where, like, maybe I should speak to somebody differently, or how can they go about that? What are some tips that you maybe use in your work life?
So one of the number one things, and I used to teach when for a period of time, the medical students that were training in psychiatry would pass through me and we would discuss nonviolent communication for a period of time. Now, the class I teach to the regular staff is about 2 days long. For these students, I only had about an hour. And so the most valuable technique I took away from that 2-day class to ensure that the students learn in that hour is, it sounds so simple, empathic listening. Because more often than not, dedicating a short period of time to genuinely paying attention to what somebody has to say and what's going on inside them. I mean, I was listening to your show earlier, and the very conversation is about feeling heard, feeling listened to. And so often, there are so many barriers to us us being able to actually listen to each other, that when someone actually feels listened to, that alone can be such a calming effect by itself. So that is, without a doubt, the number one. And to discuss empathic listening, one of the things you want to do is you want to pay attention to the feelings and facts that are being communicated. You want to make sure you're giving your undivided attention. The hardest thing to do, I think, is really coming with a non-judgmental approach. Making sure you're giving your undivided attention and paying attention to what the person is saying when it comes to their feelings and their facts allows you to really absorb exactly what's going on with the individual. Now, one of the interesting things is that empathic listening is not a passive process. It's an active process. So it's not something you just hear somebody. You got to pay attention, and not just pay attention, to engage in this listening prospect. One of the things that is very helpful is to restate and paraphrase those feelings and facts you're hearing. So you're talking to somebody saying, I'm so angry because my mom, she didn't call me today, and I want to get the hell out of here. She didn't call me today. So when I'm hearing somebody really agitated and I want to first approach them, tell me what's going on. I'm really angry because my mom is not calling me. Look, I understand that I would feel that way too. Your mother didn't call you, and I can really understand where you're coming from with that. It's really just listening to somebody is the first step when it comes to any de-escalation scenario, honestly. And sadly, there's so much inside of us naturally that we put up our own barriers to listening to not just an agitated patient, but even to our loved ones sometimes in regular communication.
Yeah.
It's a key component to any.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that I know that for myself has been, something I've been trying to work on and listen, because I think that, like in the book I was talking about conflict communication, he talks about your three different, hierarchies of your brain, which for them, they describe them as your lizard, your monkey, and your neocortex, or your human brain. So you're talking about your instinctual side when you react. If somebody throws something at you, you have the initial reaction, which is your lizard brain protecting you. Fire is hot, your hand automatically pulls away. Then you have your monkey brain, which your emotions and your sense of self and your ego is all tied up into it. And then you have your higher brain, your neocortex, or like the portion of you that's like, oh, I understand that I'm a human being, and if I can live up here, I can say, what you're saying is not about me in general. Why am I being offended at the things you're complaining about? I had to check myself for a while, transitioning a little more to be more of an open-minded, progressive person, is saying, when people are saying men are awful, or fucking white people, they're just, it's just like, and I have to realize and say, hey, it's not about me that they're saying this. I may feel like hurt because I'm like, oh, I identify as, because I'm a man and I'm white. But then you have to say, hey, but you're not talking about me. It's okay for me to say, yeah, you're valid in your feelings. There are people out there that look like me that are the same sex as me that do awful, awful things, but I don't necessarily do that. And then I have to say, hey, I need to listen, and I need to say, okay, it's okay to, it's like a yes and thing. I think that's like an important thing to remember right now. It's like, yes, Black Lives Matter. And I can still say, hey, I have a lot of police officer friends that do right things, but, it's like Chris Rock said, you can't have, a bad one. You have to denounce it. I think I've been seeing it everywhere, and it might be attributed to him or not, but he's joking about it. He's like, yeah, you can't have American Airlines being like, yeah, most of our pilots like to land the planes, but, there's some of them that, like, will totally go into the mountains, but it's okay. We're behind our pilots no matter what. It's like, no, everybody needs to be on the same page. But again, taking the emotion out of it and saying, hey, this isn't about me. This is about you. I need to listen and understand what's going on is so true. And I think that's so hard for a lot of people, because it's something we
absolutely practice. Absolutely. The ego gets so tied up. We take everything so personally. And that phrase, it's one of my favorite phrases that I teach in the class. It's not about you. It's not about you. There's so much more going on. And I think it's because more often than not, we tend to simplify the people that we meet and that we talk to. And that's where I think a lot of the times, just to speak a bit to what you mentioned with the conflicting thoughts of protesters and police, we are so black and white in our thinking most of the time that we can't see these other individuals as complex as we are, because we also tend to hold conflicting beliefs that are equally true. And the sad thing is, more often than not, that is true. I do care about the protests, and I do care about the police officers. And so often we're being forced to pick one or the other, and it's neither. We care about both. We care about both because we're much more complex than just red person, blue person, or any other thing, honestly. It's too much black and white thinking that we often deal with in our society and our culture and in ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so true because it really is. It's like I mean, I come from a place of, or at least personally, it's, I'm a huge Bernie Sanders supporter, and he's been my dude for a while now. And I think honestly, like his platform for this last, excuse me, mimosa burp's already coming up. For this last election cycle, it's not me, it's us. And it's also like thinking about, it's okay to like say, hey, I care about all people. I want police to be safe. I want protesters to be safe. I also am looking at this and saying, like, in reality, like, why are we, and this is something that Maddie and I've talked about a bunch, why are we down here? These people that are in this level, and I'm just saying this is 99% of people, these most people down here, why are we all fighting each other? I mean, there's again, this is oversimplification, and you and I have talked about this, where we're talking about micro issues versus macro issues, and it's like, this is how I always come back to this. There are things that are just like, I believe wholeheartedly there is an oligarchy that is just a small group of people that have gotten over, I can't remember what they said, $400 billion richer.
Oh, yeah.
And these, like,
the distribution of wealth is absurd, creating that oligarchy you're just describing. Absolutely. And
then you have all these people that are in here that it's like, we're all fighting each other. We're all trying to be pit against each other to fight and do these things, but really strength in numbers and in power comes in together when we say, hey, I've seen some of the best parts of humanity and some of the worst parts of humanity. Just even in the last 48 hours, you see African-American men in, I won't quote the city, I'm not sure if it was New York or if it was in another place. One police officer got cut off from his entire unit, was by himself with thousands of protesters around. So these couple gentlemen, African-American gentlemen, took the police officer, basically put him in like a little safe cove, and they all stood arm in arm, linked up to protect him, and said, hey, this is not what we're about. And I was like, that's another people are taking it apart and saying, look,
it's so good.
And it's like, that's the thing. It's like, we're all in the same boat. I've seen police officers as well. There was a sergeant, I believe it was in Atlanta, who was there. He's reprimanding his officers for being too aggressive, and he's pulling them off the line, and he's putting other guys out, and he's going to protesters saying, like, I hear you. I'm an African-American man. I have kids too. I have these conversations, and you are right. We're here to make a safe place for you to protest. We want you to protest. And it's like, it's such a supportive, good thing, but you also see people, these white nationalists, have seen police officers that are going around throwing out the white power signs in New York City, in Brooklyn.
Absolutely.
If you follow Sean King, you see some of these guys in the videos of them, and it's insane. And
it is. It's disappointing. It's so disappointing.
As a human being, it's just like, why can't we just respect another person's right to live?
I think more often than not, one of the things that I've seen so consistently, and I talk about this, I have a large group of friends that you know about already, that we talk about interesting, philosophical, social, different topics of all different varieties. And one of the common motifs that come up in our conversations is, more often than not, to end up being on the right side, we're fighting against our own natural humanity. And the best analogy I can give is when you know you're supposed to eat right, but fat, sugar, and salt just taste so good. In our evolutionary background, fat, sugar, and salt were very scarce and unavailable. So evolutionarily speaking, we were built to crave those things because they were in limited supply and limited resource. And as a result of that, in our modern society, where they're plentiful, we see the issues of obesity and a lot of other high blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes, all the issues that we see coming from that natural instinct to seek that fat, salt, and sugar. And I think that goes obviously beyond just our consumption. It goes into our social mindsets and thinking. We are built to have this in-group, out-group thinking. If you are not in my group, then I am going to hate you because you are out of the group. If you are in my group, and that's where you see the kindness and benefits of humanity, within group, you see these wonderful things of people being generous to each other, as you were describing with the police officers as well. But that's because you can hear his language. He saw them as a part of himself. And those who are acting in these violent manners are not seeing each other as individuals that can be a part of a larger group, but they're seeing each other as the enemy. And that enemy mentality breeds so much violence and hatred. And that, again, is a leftover artifact of our evolutionary background, unfortunately. So more often than not, we have to transcend our humanity to do the right thing. And it's possible. It's absolutely possible. And I think what's tragic is some people do need more help than others to achieve that. And I think that's where we run into a lot of problems, that we have these kind of too far gone people that we don't have necessarily the resources to connect to. And so they end up being these right-wing lunatics or these left-wing lunatics, whichever side it may be. Because again, it's that in-group, out-group thinking that's at the root of it all, honestly.
Yeah. It's just like really over here and really over here. Really loud people that are really, I would hope to think are the minority. These like tiny little groups. But they're just the loudest. I would say to Maddie, it's like when if you live in New York City, you get on the subway, you shut up, and you generally just stick to yourself, because it's like, that was my reading my book time. That was my quiet time on the subway, going to work or to whatever. But you can have 100 people in one car, just like jam-packed in there. But the one that gets the most attention is the screaming person over at the end. That's what everyone's focused on. And it's like showtime, or it's this or it's that, and it's just like, ugh. But in reality, what you remember from that subway ride is not the 90 people that were quiet and everyone like saying, oh, I'm sorry, no, hey, let me give you some space. Let's be nice in here. It's the one screaming person, or the person taking a dump at the other side of it. Like, the weird stuff that's happening. That's what you remember. But also, like we're talking about from an evolutionary standpoint, it's we, from a self-defense and fighting perspective and things we talked about when I was in the military, it's like you're inclined to look for danger. You're inclined to look for things that could possibly cause you harm. And what you're doing is you're saying, hey, I'm looking for the thing that is the most worrisome, because I want to survive. It's your survival instinct.
Right.
And generally you're in this level most times that you're like looking out for what could cause you harm. The traffic in the street, you're paying attention to the person that's walking towards you, that you could accidentally bump into, stuff like that. But then it's the moments where you're like, well, if I just take a moment and breathe and look up and look at the blue skies, the sun is out, there are a lot of other nice things around me, but those are the things that stick. It's like people it's strange what your mind does because of these evolutionary things that have happened from years and years and years back that are still part of our DNA and part of our our body. But at the same time, we're in a society now where that necessarily doesn't always ring true. We don't need a lot of these things, but when they're stuck in there, you can't get rid of the ego sometimes. You can't get rid of this like fear that I think is stuck inside. Where it is like, it's tribalism. It's like, this is my tribe. If you're not part of my tribe, boom.
Exactly.
I see so many people that are like, well, my martial art is better than yours, and if you don't do this, then you're stupid. And it's like, there's tribalism. The judo people, the karate people, the Krav Maga people, the jiu-jitsu people, and it's like, okay, at least all of you people are moving. That's good. Hopefully you're keeping your body better and like doing something rather than nothing. It's crazy. It's just, tribalism is I think, I don't know. It's insane, and exactly what you're saying. It's like you need to be inclusive of other people, no matter what they look like, no matter who they are, what they are, because then that's just gonna hopefully make people love each other more, which is what we need more of.
And just to really validate the point, even though it should be validated as it is, as we've discussed it, but to further validate the point, one of the longest periods of peace that we ran into in the course of history of the world, essentially, was when we recognized the globalization of the world and the trade economy started becoming a normalization. And when the trade economy started to boom, you saw a significant decrease in wars. Because why? We needed to rely upon each other to get goods and services. Absolutely. And by creating that larger group, admittedly in an economic sense, which obviously has led to a lot of other divisive issues, but when you see any opportunity to create an inclusiveness, you see the benefits of a reduction in violence.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely true. When everyone does better, there's less or fewer or less need to really be divisive or go after somebody else's resources or go after this.
Exactly.
It's like,
that primal mentality of everybody.
Yes.
There's nailing
it too, and it's great. There's this Guillaume is one of the owners of Moto New York, and he's awesome, but he always says it, and he's very successful. Oh, see, this is the love we talk about. for this from the missus.
Oh my God, that was magic.
She knows.
That was magic. I just saw. Here, sir.
Shout out to Guillaume, and we've talked about it a bunch. And he's very much so a person that he's like, look, they have a studio that's very successful, and they're doing stuff, but he is very kind and helpful. And he's like, look, there's room for everybody at the top. We could have, instead of all of our wealth conglomerated, and this is just going back to the money thing, conglomerated in this tiny percentage at the top, and why diversify, make sure that people can elevate everybody. If everybody has access to mental health care, to regular health care, to taking care of your bodies, we'll see a decrease in diabetes and preventable diseases, cardiovascular diseases, mental health issues. My
Mm-hmm.
mother, she's the CNO of a hospital in Southern California, and one of her major projects and things that I know she's done previously was like opening up more free clinics to, one, declog the hospital of people coming in there, but also give people access to healthcare and preventative issues. And
Mm-hmm.
her region in Riverside County has seen a decrease in preventable deaths from
Oh,
cardiovascular, from diabetes and other things that have happened. And it's just like, but it's the same thing. You're elevating people to a level where they're not having to scrape and they're not having to fight each other for resources. We don't need to
right.
fight for the scraps down here, which then in turn, just like you said, with the global economy and globalization, we're not taking from you and being very like,
Mm-hmm.
this is my stuff. It's like, I got plenty. Let me share it with you. Oh, you're going to share with me too. Oh, this is great. Awesome. This is beneficial.
Exactly.
And everybody wins.
And I think it's kind of just to show how all of this kind of ties in with each other to the beginning of your conversation, where you were discussing how is it that there's this oligarchy going on and all the rest of us are at each other. Why are we at each other? Because we don't have the resources to honestly take care of ourselves. And I don't want to put my tinfoil hat on here, but there could be potential reasons behind the oligarchy continuing this sort of, you almost want to call it this feudal society where the people at the lower ranks, who are certainly the most plentiful, are too busy trying to literally stay alive than to care about these larger issues that do need to be addressed without a doubt.
Yeah.
And also I have to give, of course, a quick shout out to my girlfriend, Devin. I say female Devin because my girlfriend and my brother have the same name. Long story. We're going to move past that. But she actually works a lot in what your mother is working in, of trying to ensure that there are clinics available to larger populations with the goal of being preventable diseases not reaching the point of harming individuals. And that happens far too often now because of what you were describing, the reduction in resources being available to the very people who need it, who need it actually.
It's insane. It's the communities that don't have access to healthcare, the communities that don't have access to fresh vegetables and farmer markets, things that are affordable. It's insane. When I lived in Spanish Harlem, when I was up on, or like 119, I was on 105, 101. In those neighborhoods, when I lived above 96th Street, excuse me, Mimosa burp again.
It's all good, brother.
It's coming through. It was insane. It was way cheaper for me to eat out and get Burger King or this or that than it was to go to the grocery store to buy fresh fruits and vegetables to do things.
Right.
It was insane. There are places to do stuff, but then as soon as I moved south, I realized, oh man, I have so many markets, so many things that are available, street vendors with fruit on it, like things like that. And these communities that you see disproportionately affected by COVID, which they're coming to find out is a lot more cardiovascular and diabetes issues that are really affecting the majority of people that are actually dying and passing than necessarily just respiratory, are coming from communities with high diabetes and cardiovascular issues from, poor health, they don't have access to, which is insane, which is, I don't understand why everybody isn't, decrying for Medicare for all, to say, hey, if we take care of our people, our healthcare costs are going to go down because fewer people are going to be in the hospital for these preventable diseases, because people can get their annual checkups, can go to the doctors to get, taken care of, and just taking care of your neighbors. Like if I don't take care of my neighbors next door and they die and then their house catches on fire, my house catches on fire. So why don't I be a friend and help them do the things they need to do, because they'll do the same to me in return. There was a thing that I always go back to was the fighting for 15, for McDonald's and fast food employees fighting for a minimum wage of $15.
Oh, yes.
Which is like, absolutely, yeah, you're working all the time.
Please,
why not
yes.
have an age? Inflation has done this. Billionaires and CEOs have done this. Everyone else, we do this.
Yeah, and we don't ever grow our wealth.
Yeah, I've seen and there were so many arguments at the time that were saying, hey, we are, what was it? They're like, oh, well, EMTs don't even make that much, or there are other people that don't make this much money. You should make as much money as a medical professional. And I'm like, that's a stupid argument, because the argument is
not a good one.
No, because the EMTs and people out there should also be making more money.
Oh my God, exactly.
Why can't we all just do this instead of like, oh, well, you can't be the same as me because I have special things. It's like, okay, well, you making $20 an hour as an EMT or whatever it is out there, yeah, you should be making $45 or $50. Like, let's bump that up. Now, fast food workers, if they're making, minimum wage of whatever it is in their state, bump it to 15, because again, it's expensive. Like, how can you work at a McDonald's in Manhattan and never be able to afford anything even remotely near real estate there until you get way, 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 way out. And then now you got to
Exactly.
keep, it's just like, it's insane.
It's this
And
self-perpetuating cycle that ends up causing this. And, you know, I don't want to make jumps to conclusions because I'm always careful about that. But whether it's unintentional or intentional, it perpetuates this cycle at the end of the day, honestly.
yes,
It could very well be intentional if it's a coordinated group. Since I don't have evidence for that, I can't say that. But
yeah.
whether it's intentional or unintentional, this is why it's perpetuated, honestly.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel I'm wondering if it's, I don't have as much faith in the government, think that they're as smart as everyone thinks they are. In a lot of groups, they're like, oh, they're so organized and smart and they do all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, Trump is like, probably eats his boogers. Like they're not that coordinated and that smart. Being part of a military organization and seeing the waste and the disorganization from the inside.
Oh man,
it's not as smoothly connected as you think it is. But also the waste of money and the issues and things that they put in said, hey, if you don't spend this money this year, we're not going to allocate as much money to you next year. Therefore, what they're doing is taking thousands and thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and destroying stuff so they could rebuy it just so they can keep their budget. That's
insane. Absurd. Oh my God.
I've seen it.
I know my group right now is rolling in their grave, honestly, because they're dying to hear this shit. And it's absurd. This is the examples of that resource allocation, that resource management that is why we don't have access to the resources where we need them more specifically.
Absolutely.
And that is, I'm just so disappointed to hear it in more literal terms like that.
There were times, just as a small micro example, is we have to go to squad bays and other places and say, hey, this barracks is been out of use forever, but we have to keep beds in it, and the beds are old, or not even beds are old, they're like a year or two old, like mattresses, and they're like, you know, we have $10,000 we have to spend, so we're just going to throw away all these old mattresses, which are like a year or two old, and buy all new mattresses for barracks that weren't even in use. And it's like,
oh my God,
why
oh
are we
my God.
that? Because
I'm actually hearing these examples for the first time. This is really absurd.
Yeah, it's insane. And it's the rule behind it is, I understand why they're doing it, because they're saying if we don't spend this $10,000 now, our budget next year will be $10,000 less, because they'll say, oh, you don't actually need this. But what happens when you actually do need it? If something happens and they're like, oh, we really actually need to purchase this new, medical facility where we had to outfit it with these things, which would have cost us this much money, but we lost that in the budget because we didn't spend it last year. And it's just like rules put forth that nobody actually looks at to try and like change. And it's like we have so many rules in our government that are just so old, that are outdated and not we don't need them anymore. It's like, why can't
well-defined policy is what we need. Yes, exactly. Well-defined, clear, logical policy is what we need.
Yes. And it has gone too far to this place where people are just like, doesn't affect me. It's like you said, like fats and sugar.
That's it right there.
Something that affects you the next day. And when I used to be a smoker, it didn't affect me then and there. And I was like, whatever, it's fine. I don't see the effects of this. It's okay. And then over time, you're like, oh, no, actually, this is bad. But you've gotten so deep into it that you're like, what can I do? I can't do anything about it anymore.
Fuck it, I'll just keep doing it.
Yeah, I feel like people with society, this is just kind of what's happened. We've continued to get to a place where we're just comfortable about it and say, well, what can I do? The rich people have all the money anyway. They employ me. I can't afford to be fired because then I lose my health insurance, and then I lose my ability to pay for my kids and school and all these other things that happen. And we can't, like, where do you go with that? What can you do? So it's crazy.
Complacency is such a dangerous aspect of our society nowadays as well. It's just a lack of care, a lack of interest, which is why I have such a deep respect for the protesters who are taking the action to go out there and do something about it. It's just difficult, though, you know, just to see such violent mayhem and knowing that so many people at the end of the day are just getting hurt on any side.
Yeah.
I run into so much of this cognitive dissonance. I was really paying attention closely at the beginning of your show because I'm so internally torn by this respect I have for the protesters who are stepping up to, like you were describing, a very long-standing, unfair institution that's been going on for decades, honestly, if not more so. But then seeing the results of the violence as the consequences of that, and in my head saying, no, we can't be violent, but knowing that the message is being lost in the process. But then my mind goes right back to, you know, my dad was a firefighter in New York City for 20 4 years, I forgot, 20-something years, he retired to Florida recently. And just imagining, holy crap, what if my dad was there responding to one of those and he got hurt or God forbid died? And just, it's just such a deep internal conflict that I haven't fully settled my position on the violence question yet, though I understand the purposes and the reasons behind it. It's a very difficult thing I'm wrestling with, honestly.
Yeah. And I hear that. I think there's something innately you don't want to see bad things happen. I think the group of people that are protesting, that are out, generally we're protesting because we don't want bad things to happen. We don't want to see people
Right.
Yeah, it's
Oppressed,
like
hurt.
Patty's put it on there too. Like I just say, yeah, it's true. It's like there is the reason they're protesting is because people are dying. You know, it's like the violence is happening. You know, it is there. Like it's so totally true. It's already happening, and this is a reaction to the things that are happening. And you know, again, Colin Kaepernick, many people that are protesting peacefully and doing stuff that were for long times, it's almost like it's reached above a boiling point where now it's boiled over. You can't do anything about it. It's open. It needs to release the pressure valve on it. But then it's also, it's insane seeing, and this is, you know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, not whatever. I like facts, I like organized things, but seeing white nationalists, seeing racist cops seeing people purposely inciting violence and instigate it so they can have their violence response. That's because what they want, they're like, I play Call of Duty, I'm on here, I'm jacked up, I wanted to be a cop because I saw, what is the Bad Boys? They want to have
the ego-driven behaviors.
Yes. Oh. And it's like people want to have that, so they're instigating violence and doing it. And there's so many protesters in places that I've seen as well, where there are a lot of protesters that are like videotaping these people causing the violence, and a majority of the people there are like, dude, don't do that. Don't do it. And also a majority of the people that are inciting and starting the violence, I've seen a lot of white people doing it. And there's, and I will say a disproportionately amount of Black or African American women that are being like, hey, stop this. This is not our point. This is not what we're doing. At least
they see the real videos.
Message. Yeah, and it's like our message is being received in a specific way, and this is what we're doing. It's crazy.
It comes down to the very specific nature of each. It's kind of frustrating, but it comes down to the individual nature of each incident. You know, I don't deny, and I know you teach it, and I think it's such an important aspect to teach, self-defense, making sure that you're protecting your group and yourself from actually being harmed to a point where you can no longer take care of yourself. You know, that is a key component that is unavoidable violence, I guess I would call. And it's just avoiding the violence that is unnecessary and accepting the violence that is unavoidable, which is a very difficult thing to wrestle with, I think, because each case you're kind of wondering, was it necessary? Was it avoidable? It's the back and forth, the minutia of each case. But, you know, in the country, what's going on right now, because there's so many cases, I don't certainly doubt that there is a lot of unavoidable violence going on right now as well.
Absolutely. And I think that people need to understand this violence, the protest, none of this would be happening if there wasn't a cause for it. You know, if there wasn't police brutality, if we didn't have an administration that's saying, hey, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. It's like, that is when you have
such a bad statement.
It's so bad. When you have a leader that is when, you know, George Floyd gets killed, Breonna Taylor gets killed, when when Ahmaud gets gunned down and run down in Georgia, is off golfing and doesn't care and literally doesn't protest anything about it. His comments on Twitter saying, you know, way to go for these protesters in Michigan, you know, taking their guns and walking up against their governor.
De Blasio sanctioning driving an SUV into a crowd. What?
Yeah, it's insane.
What?
And then you have their return is, or at least specifically with Trump, is like doesn't care about any of this stuff happening. And then as soon as he gets censored on Twitter, now he's creating executive order the same day because they pissed him off because they said something against him. It's terrible leadership.
It's an administration where we cannot enact the change in a way that is appropriate. And so and sadly, you know, I like to believe, although I still hold some hesitation and reservation, that we're coming to the end of this administration. But in the divisive world, in this divisive world right now, there is, you know, my brother and I were discussing it before about given that Biden so perfectly represents the corporate Democrat that's going to kind of keep a lot of the same shit going that's been going on under both Republican and Democrat industries. Bernie Sanders was the one real prospect for change in that kind of a period of time. Yeah. But we were having a really deep conversation of, is abstaining.
Jason, I'm actually going to just cut you off real quick because we got 13 seconds before Instagram Live cuts us off. I'm going to restart this live so we can continue to go because I think this is important. We have 6 seconds. So thank you very much, guys. I'm going to restart this up, reinvite Jason, and keep going on. Peace.
Be right back.
All right, we're back. Let's give it a second for people to rejoin in. Yeah, sorry for the quick, abrupt ending there. I'll have to edit these videos so it goes back to back when I get on my computer later. But yeah, things are, I think it's an important thing to continue to discuss and to talk about and have the ability to have this discourse. So I'm going to invite, get Jason back on.
All right, welcome back, y'all. All right, here we go. Hey, Jason, back.
Hey, glad to be back.
Part 2, we reset the timer, and now we don't have to rush on anything. Yeah, I was like, oh man, like a little timer on the top like pops on. It's like, you have 30 seconds, and I was like, what? Right, so we were discussing before I cut you off. You were talking about you and the guys talking about Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders and how there's actually real change that can go on. So let me let you continue on where you're at there before I cut you off.
Sure. So the conversation really was around whether or not, and it got messy because a lot of our conversations come down to definitions, terminology, all that stuff to make sure we establish a lot. It started with the conversation of abstaining from voting for Biden because of him perpetuating the consistent corporate democracy, and whether or not that mentality was justifiable. Yeah. And although I can empathize with the mentality and the frustration of anything continuing even slightly the same, to me, the widespread imminent damage, imminent is the key word there, damage of the current administration is why I think it's inherently wrong to hold that mentality at all. Even though certainly Biden does not represent the values that I think are necessary for the country at this time, there's too much harm occurring now to abstain, period. It's important to have a voice, period. And whether that voice is through your vote, which it should be, along with just your voice to the people that you know, the people that you care about, the people that you actually do have some degree of influence on. You got to maintain course and say, look, right now there's too much harm. Yes, I don't agree with them, but I got to do anything I can to make sure that we don't continue the harm that's happening now.
Yeah. I mean, when you have the international community, it's gotten to a point where it's, yes, America is a laughingstock, and it has been for a long time for a lot of people for years. You know, I'm not personally, Maddie and I were supposed to have our honeymoon. We were supposed to go to Europe and do London and Paris and Tel Aviv and like, do stuff in April. Not done because
I'm so sorry.
That's our luck. That's just what happens with us. We always have to lose all of our stuff because of weird pandemics and things. But, you know, you see it across and they're like, oh, stupid Americans or, you know, bougie America or whatever. There's so many things. It's like people don't really like Americans. Yeah, because I can understand the sentiment because there's a lot of dumb people that just, not necessarily just say dumb, but like things that are like, I can't even describe it. But
illogical is what comes to my mind, so I don't question their intelligence. Just illogical thinking is what I see so often.
Absolutely. Well, it's like you see it, and it's just like we're pulling out of the World Health Organization. We're doing a lot of things. We pulled out of the Iran nuclear agreement. We pulled out of the Paris climate accords. We've done so many things to alienate allies, which we've talked about, our globalization and our global economy and helping each other, where we've alienated ourselves so much and pushed apart the ability to be together as a community that not only are we a laughingstock, but now you have international organizations that are saying like, if you're from such and such a country, don't travel to the United States because this state is so racist or so many hate crimes happen. Watch out. Like when we're the country that people are warning people don't go to, can we not take a second to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, hey, you know, if the international community overwhelmingly is saying don't go to America, and especially these certain states which tend to trend a specific way, you say that you know it's a you need to look at yourself. You need to say, hey, when I honestly, personally, when we look at North American continent, which I'm just including United States and Canada in it, is okay. you look at our neighbors to the north, and it's like, not you know, it's yes, it's cold, but
Yeah.
you get universal health care, or you've got health care at least generally for all citizens and take it in.
Mm-hmm.
They enact swift, gun reform change when something bad happens. They generally, I would like to say, overwhelmingly, mostly do the right thing.
Yeah.
When you see their platforms that going in, it's like, why can't we as a country, be, consistent with our own rights and values and do things? We get stuck in so much policy and red tape and
Mm-hmm.
bullshit. But it's like
Bullshit.
it's like we're saying with Biden. Yes, I am a Bernie supporter, and I will throw this out there too. If you still have the ability to vote and mail in the states, if you're out there and you're watching this and you can vote and mail in states, and you want to vote Bernie. Go in there, go do it. Vote for the candidate that best
Mm-hmm.
speaks to you. For us, because it'll affect the platform going forward. I didn't even think about this. Somebody tweeted it the other day, and I'm not on Twitter a lot, but I do catch certain things, and I forget that Amy Klobuchar is the senator for the state of Minnesota, where a lot of this violence is sparked off and going in. And where is she? What is she doing? And she's supposed to be a potential candidate for VP. It's just like it's such
Mm-hmm.
a bad look and not a good place to be. Why are we? I really, 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 really don't want Trump to get elected again. But also,
I know.
it can't be a party that shoots itself in the foot every time when you're having these.
I know.
Road,
it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating.
It just doesn't make sense, But I agree with you. I think Biden does not necessarily speak to me as a voter. I think the things
Mm-hmm.
he generally does, he relies on his connections to Barack Obama and other people. He has the most failed presidential bids in the history of the country. I think it's 5 or 6 times he's run for president and not even made it past the regular rounds. And
Mm-hmm.
the only time he's getting in is because the other candidate is so unbelievably bad.
Yeah.
That it's just but at the
The
same
lesser
time,
of two evils is not the candidate you're looking for,
No, you want to have an inspiring candidate who has your back, who really, really has been on the ground floor, who has marched and doesn't make up stories about it, who actually was arrested and didn't make stories about it.
Mm-hmm.
But am I voting for Biden? Yeah, absolutely, because I have to. I can't, and this goes back to privilege as well. I can't say. I could say, hey, it doesn't matter who gets elected, because I do agree that Kamala or Stacey Abrams.
Abrams would be excellent.
Abrams would be awesome, man.
Abrams, I would be a big fan of.
I have to say that with my privilege, I'm a white dude. I have in the United States of America, being a white male, it pretty much puts you up here.
Tops. Tops.
I mean, 30 Rock with Maddie probably comment on it when Jack Donaghy. If anybody watches 30 Rock out there, Jack Donaghy is the boss, played by who's he played by? He's played by
Alec Baldwin.
Alec Baldwin. He talks to one of the other he's like, yeah, as a white Republican man, I'm basically at the top up here. I'm fine. And this other guy is like, oh, I'm a white dude too. This is great. He's like, no, but you're really more like Kenneth. He's like, you identify as a Latino woman. You're not quite
socioeconomically. You're a Latino woman. I'm sorry, you're not quite.
But it's true though. It's like me as a white heterosexual man in the United States of America have a lot of privileges where a lot of people don't. I can just get away with stuff. There are things that Maddie and I joke about. I'm like, man, if I wasn't a white dude right now, I could be in a lot of trouble. And it's to understand that, to recognize that, say, hey, I could just say I'm going to abstain from voting because Bernie isn't in. I could totally do that. But what that is saying is I don't support my LGBTQIA friends. I don't support my friends that are of people of color. I don't support immigrants. I don't support these other things. And by me not voting and abstaining, it's just me being a big F you to all those people. And that's not fair, and that's not what you should do if you want to be an ally or support. It was I'm gonna vote for Biden. Do I like Biden? No. Honestly,
no,
probably for
I
what
understand.
we have for breakfast. But at the same time, I would rather have somebody that is in support of bringing people together and trying to be part of a party that wants to take care of everybody versus saying, these white supremacists, they ain't that bad.
No, that's a full stop no on that.
Yeah, that's brakes, pump the brakes. No, not at all. I love that Andrew Yang, who came out of nowhere, who's brought universal basic income to the table.
I liked him a lot.
I mean, he wanted all the cops to do jujitsu, so I think that's a good idea. I love it, which I think is a good thing. I think that Bernie Sanders in the 2016 campaign brought about, universal health care and these other ideas to the table. So you can see the party getting pushed in a direction and being and brought up, which I think is great. I think Elizabeth Warren has brought a lot to the table.
Definitely.
You have a lot of people that come out, AOC, Elon, Andrew Yang is from Schenectady, where we're broadcasting live.
What? I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's
Yang
awesome.
Gang. So I think there's the face of the Democratic Party. I don't think is going to continue to stay necessarily. I mean, Bernie Sanders aside, old and white and like, bleh, I can't even like go pretend to be Joe Biden because it makes me feel like sick and I feel like bad for saying.
Yeah, it feels so pandery. It feels so pandery.
Yes. I mean, like for real though. But man, it's just like you got to do what's right for the other people, because if you have a voice and you have the ability and the privilege to go out and do these things, you have to speak for the people that don't. It's like it's the entire basis of the United States. We're always like we're a voice for and a beacon for hope for other people in other countries that don't have the ability to speak for themselves. That's why
you're tired, you're huddled masses. It's right there on the Statue of Liberty.
Hey, if you said that quote, I guarantee you so many people are like, I don't know what that means. What is that? Where did that come from? Did you make that up? And it's like, no, Republican, sir. This is not a I mean, Democrat. There's a lot of people that wouldn't know that. It's crazy, though. Like
It is. It's disappointing in many cases, honestly. Mm-hmm. But we work what we got, and we just got to keep moving in the right direction, honestly. And that's I say that sometimes as a reminder to help build the stamina for what's going to be a war of attrition. Because this isn't going to change, I think, even within our own lifetime. We need to consistently keep this message and this energy going for an extended couple of generations, I imagine, to move us in the right direction of protecting more than just the oligarchy in the current situation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's not an overnight solution or fix. I think that there's a long-term battle that's going to have to happen over generations. Our generational change may only be, I mean, if we look back at where things were, 80, 50, 70 years ago, 1950s, and you talk about there are still segregated like diners and places in the South. There are still places that are, where schools are like, no, we're a white school. No, it's just like you look at in 70 years. That's like one generation, if that. Like there's one. Like my grandparents were alive at that period of time, and you look at the period of change and so much has happened. And you see the how quickly things have come in the age of technology and information after the internet, when things can spread for good and bad. I think a lot of good has happened, but it's given a lot of people a voice that. And I was talking to Maddie about this the other day. You're in like a tribalist society, right? I don't get my news. I can't talk to so and so from this other city. I can't talk to so and so from this other city. But the internet gave the ability for all the village idiots to connect.
Yes.
So now
the
you have
smart people and the village idiots, both of them are now able to connect on huge, wide scales.
Yes, and I would like to say the smart people are probably at work or doing things that are beneficial to society. So you got these village idiots that are all they do is sit all day on their computers on 4chan, being racist or
4chan.
it's the worst.
It's a bad place.
It's a bad place. Don't ever go to the website. It's awful. But it's one of those things where it's like it's Idiocracy. I keep telling Maddie we have to watch Idiocracy, but she's like, it is too close to like what could actually be our future could be.
Yeah.
But it's
and we keep going into these echo chambers, which is why I value so much having conversations with my larger group of friends, about 7 of us in total, because there's a wide variety of viewpoints that we tend to, and as much as we agree, there are incredibly awesome periods of time, and I say awesome even though it doesn't sound it, where we are locked in battle for hours in this chat over different principles and different ideas. And it's that diversity and exposure. And that's the exposure I was lucky to get here in New York City, because I was born and raised here in the city. And my group of friends is very internationally diverse, honestly. Yeah. So I've been given that wonderful opportunity to be desensitized that not enough people have been given. As you're describing, it's just the echo chamber of people talking to themselves and agreeing with themselves that breeds this tribalism that we were just discussing.
Yeah, it's such a bad cycle. It really is a cycle. It's a thing that you notice that my mother-in-law, she's read a book. She'll love that I'm giving her a little shout out here, Joe, the Reverend Joe Page. She's I think it's called Pandemic or something like that, but it's talking about the 1918-1919 pandemic,
Oh, the Spanish flu. Yep.
Spanish flu, and how bad it was. But she wrote an article for, I don't know what paper she writes for up here or something, and it was like Pandemic Jeopardy or something. She was joking about. She's like, tell me which pandemic these quotes came from, and it's surprising the same exact things are being said and done 100 years ago as are
That's
today.
amazing.
It's the exact same. You couldn't tell which quote came from which period, except for one of
That's
the posts
amazing.
specifically was using like very like dated language, but otherwise it was like you have the anti-masking groups. Yeah, there you go. The Times Union. Thank you, Maddie. Um, there's in San Francisco in 1918 they had an entire group. They did lockdowns. They did the same exact stuff they did now for a
Hmm.
longer period of time. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have TV. They didn't have all this other stuff to like keep you occupied. And the anti-masking groups were like coming out and saying, we want to be able to go out and get haircuts and take our masks off. We want to go back to the theater. We want to do this stuff. The second they did that, they had a resurgence of the Spanish flu, and then
Yeah.
you had the next winter where things got way worse. The city got shut down for twice as long as it was before.
Yep.
And it was interesting seeing that again. We are in a cycle. You're seeing in this time and place where this systemic racism, where there's like generational racism, is being taught from
Hmm.
parent to kid, and it's just continually cycling over and over and over again because
Right.
they're learning this stuff and not going out. I think exactly what you said is true. You grew up in New York. You grew up in a place where you got to identify and see other people of different races, different creeds, different sexual orientations, and
Hmm.
you got to realize that hey, they're just people, and we're all people.
Yeah.
Like we're all cool. Like
Life is hard. We're all just people trying to get by, man. That's
yeah,
really what it
yeah.
is.
Until you're a billionaire, life is hard,
Exactly.
and then you're rich, and you're like,
Exactly.
whatever, I got no problems or whatever. You
Yeah.
know, it's like, but it's
You
true though.
see, they
Like
lose
there's
the
so many
empathy.
people. Well, why is it?
Hmm.
Why do you? Okay, I want to know what your answer to this would be. Is and Matt and I
Ooh.
talk about this. Is why is it that okay we talk about tiny more tribalist society like cities in different places in middle America or not necessarily middle America, this could be the South, there are pockets in
Sure.
California, it's all over the place, there's some in Washington
Hmm.
where it's very like you're not like me therefore you cannot be my friend or we don't like you, it's very
Hmm.
not just racist but also like sexist, very, it's just there's weird
Anything
stuff.
else, pretty much. It's just any
They
notable differences they want to avoid.
absolutely, so what happens is then the kids of these people move and they go to a major city. They go to New York, they go to LA, they go
Yeah.
to, these different, typically those two or some other cities that are out there, Chicago, other stuff, Atlanta, where it's a lot more diversity, where people are interconnected and you have to go with people. And then what happens is these Republican leaning or maybe racist or other leaning people come to these major cities and then their viewpoint changed. And a lot of times they go back and they're like, that's not true. What I learned as a kid is not true because I've experienced it firsthand. Why
Yeah.
is why is that? Why do you think, or do you think that's a true statement, or what is your thought about that?
I think there are certainly, I think if you do, here's the trick. I imagine it comes heavily to sort of when you shift away. Because the deeper you spend in that original environment, the more entrenched you're going to be in those beliefs. And I'm speaking out of my ass here a little bit, but I imagine there's some kind of threshold where those beliefs are no longer just beliefs, but kind of ingrained. Now it's hard to kind of come back from that. It's I guess an analogy I can think of right now is learning a language. Once you hit a certain age, when you pass a certain age, it becomes very difficult to learn a language than it is at a younger age where it's easier to adapt and absorb that information.
Yeah,
So I could see it being heavily correlated with when you're able to sort of escape that intolerant environment and move to the cities. And if you move to the cities at an earlier age, like what you would hope maybe in your early 20s and stuff like that, or even earlier, of course,
yeah,
you will see that shift in mentality. But if you come in and you're maybe mid to late 30s, you're less likely to shift that mentality. So in the boring answer, both are fundamentally true. It's just a matter of what variables are for each individual at the time.
it's true. I get that. I feel you there. I think there's something to say as well about societies, and you talk about European societies in certain like Nordic countries or other countries, France, for example, other places where, or I guess a little bit different on both those, but you get this culturally they're like, yeah, healthcare is right, or culturally it's like, yeah, we want to educate our kids. Yes, we want to have, take care of everybody because we realize as a society it's better, and we want to be accepting of the people that are coming in. And you notice that these countries, it's less of a problem, I guess. Would say you're not having kids having to go out and experience for themselves that it's going in. And it's weird to see in the United States, we're still stuck in the cycle where it's like you've had generations of a family that have never left the same county and region, where they live in this place and they don't go out and they don't experience
that bubble, man.
Yeah.
That echo chamber bubble. And and I imagine, especially given the comparisons you're drawing between kind of Europe and the United States, in Europe, it's encouraged to travel and experience. And what's interesting, not just different cultures, but widely different cultures. There are different cultures within the States. Mississippi lives differently than New York, but we have a much closer connection than maybe Spain and Italy. And between a combination of having wildly different cultures in Europe and the encouragement to travel, you're being encouraged to gain that desensitization to the other cultures that helps you humanize the other individuals that you may have been brought up to demonize.
Yeah.
And that, here in the States, it's less encouragement to travel, even without of the country, let alone within the country. And on top of that, that lack of significant difference between the cultures can dampen that effect of desensitization that we're describing a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an interesting dichotomy of thinking about how things are here in the States versus other countries. And again, yes, Europe has a lot longer of a history, and there's a lot of dark history in Europe, from the Inquisitions to the plagues to wars to actual monarchies and things happening. And yes, we're relatively on the world scale a newer country. We're first of all, we're brand new.
Oh, very much so, honestly.
New wealth.
Very, very much so, honestly. Whoa, 270 years now old?
Something like that, yeah.
Something along those lines. And that's compared to millennias that are other areas. Millennias. Thousands.
Absolutely.
We're talking about.
Well, even if you go look in China and the dynasties that have been around that can be traced back to Ming Dynasty, I mean, just it's insane, the time that has passed in other countries versus us. We're a blip in the world.
We really are. We really are. An interesting blip. Don't get me wrong. We're certainly a very interesting blip, but still a blip that has a lot of learning to do in this process, I think. Yeah, and alongside the rest of the world at the end of the day. Say again?
Absolutely. We're definitely a teenager right now. We're just
great analogy.
We're an angsty teenager that's doesn't really know what it's about yet. We're just beating ourselves up because we've got all the feels we don't know how to express.
And who better, not to rag too much, but who better epitomizes an angsty emo teen than our leader right now, I guess.
Seriously though, he's like,
who gets mad at minor things that don't really matter.
He's like, I'm pissed because Twitter put a little check mark on my thing and told people I lied. It's like, they knocked me out. Let's be angry at them. And it's the things that this administration are doing are from the party that's we're all about the Constitution and we're doing this, is doing so many unconstitutional and illegal acts that just seemingly continue to get away with them just over and over again. And it's at a point, even myself being frustrated to a point where it's without violence, what else is there can you actually do towards anything? Because you exhaust the ability to actually go forward and do things correctly and by the law, but then you have a party that's screw it, we're going to do what we want. We're going to gerrymander districts. We're going to, and this isn't even something I'm making up. These are literally, look up the articles on the gentleman who died, that his daughter found on his hard drives an entire decades-long plan of gerrymandering districts for the Republican Party and to create voter disenfranchisement and make it difficult for people of color and people that are in lower socioeconomic groups to vote. It's insane. And
it is.
We're part of a party that, yes, there are a lot of rich Democrats that own a lot of stuff and whatever, but generally are not going out hey, how can we fuck over people as much as we can? It's
it's just not monsters. They're not good, but they're not monsters.
It's straight up. It's okay, I'm not going to vote for the person, there's a guy in the room that's literally stabbing somebody right now, and then there's somebody in the other side of the room who's just being really creepy and smelling everybody's hair. Neither are good, but I'd probably rather talk to the person that's sniffing people's hair. And that's an awful description, but that's basically our political like landscape right now. It's so
Yeah,
bad.
it's currently where we're at, unfortunately, until we can get some more grassroots opportunities to change, which,
Yeah.
it's difficult to necessarily hope for the success, but hope is kind of what we have at this
Yeah.
point, and a faith that we can make some kind of a difference through the efforts that we take. And it's not just taking efforts, period. It's taking efforts intelligently. It's really
Yeah.
thinking about our next steps. Because guess what? The guy who had that thing on his laptop thought very carefully about his next steps for the next couple decades.
Yeah.
And we need to take that level of planning, thought, and care and attention to detail into the way we approach trying to change the system for the benefit of the larger group. And to give everybody a little bit of hope, I always like to sing the praise about this book, and I sing the praise of it in my my group chat as well. It's Steven Pinker. He wrote this book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, which shows that in the course of human history, if you look from the inception of human civilization to current date, there has been consistently an upward trend line towards greater, social justice, towards greater inclusion of larger classes. There's always a trend moving upwards, but undoubtedly it's a kind of a spiky trend. You're going to see a lot of pitfalls, such as the Dark Ages, or one might even say our current timeline right now, where we're in kind of a free fall of what we should be doing. But know, at least for anybody who's looking for a sense of hope, that since the inception of human civilization, when it wasn't a joke, women were property, we've gotten to a point where we have improved, and we can continue to improve if we invest the effort and energy and time that we should intelligently towards the efforts of improvement.
Absolutely. Long-term goals, long-term planning, making sure that, yes, things don't change overnight, but ultimately the trend is going up. I agree. I saw a graph that was talking about, you're like, even just talking about infant mortality rates were consistently down here, but over the trend overall, we're going up on it. Yes, but babies die. Yes, it's awful, but we're doing this. And another graph that was talking about these pitfalls that we're talking about, these little sections, it's like things are going great. You have something very bad happen. It drops down a lot. And then you see social unrest and change, and tends to be violent, or like something that happens. France, you talk about, the change
Great
in
example.
France, and it's like
Great
things
example.
bad happen. You got your monarchists that, oh, boop, the guillotine was invented. Boop, they're back up here now. And it's like things are changing, but ultimately you have times of great growth and expansion, and then you have a setback. And then this setback, people get pissed off and angry, and it happens. And these blips, this blip is maybe 20 years. This isn't like a overnight thing. This is like, it takes you 15 years to get here, 5 years of a decline. Now you got a violent social unrest, but ultimately from here, you're here. And again,
great point.
One thing that's hard is it being, again, saying, I'm generally, personally, and it's I have to recognize this, I'm on the group that when the blips go up and down, I'm generally just kind of here, because it doesn't affect my blip, generally speaking. Yes, being a poor white dude, bad. Being poor generally sucks. It's not like the easiest thing. You can't just be like, oh man, I got sick, I got a $5,000 bill, I can pay this. No, now I'm bankrupt. But ultimately speaking, I'm not the person that's having to deal with these major up and downs. Women, people of color, people of different sexual orientations are the ones that are driving and leading a lot of these changes. And the only thing I can do, or other people that look like me, or are men, or other people can do, we can support, we can believe, we can listen to, and we can trust. The people
be allies in an actionable sense to those groups that are currently disenfranchised.
Absolutely. Not just sharing a sticker on your Insta
stories. Or liking a story on some kind of social media site. Honestly, it's not effective. It's not effective. It makes you feel good, but that's that instant gratification taking over, and not the real work that's being done.
It's true. It's so true. Get out there. I have friends, and I know, that are lawyers, some people that are out there and saying, hey, I'm offering my services pro bono. I can't be there to protest with you, but maybe we can come out and do it. The bus drivers in New York being like, screw you, I'm not driving prisoners and people that you're tying up. And I think the union actually backed them up, and the whole bus drivers union said, we're not going to transport NYPD's arrests. That's just not what we're going to do. Good for them. That's a good point to stand up and say, hey, we are not going to be complicit in what's going on. Even there's been police officers I've seen videos of, which I love, and it's great, that are in different cities. New York, I've seen some in Atlanta, Washington, that are specifically you know, they're like, look, I understand what you're going through. There was a protest in a video where the police officer is standing on the front line and he's crying and he's like, I feel for you, and I really feel bad about the position I'm in, but I have a job and I'm have to do it. That his superiors took him off the line because they didn't want emotionally compromised. They wanted somebody that would be ready to commit violence on, and they threw another guy out there that was baton was started shoving people immediately.
And watching all the UFC, he's like, yo, I'm coming after that person.
Oh, those are the worst.
The worst people, man.
Yeah, honestly, like so Nick is not on here, but I had Nick as a guest last week, and he was talking about there's just certain groups of people that you know are just awful. People that clap when a plane lands, awful people. They're just the worst. Like, it's like, why are you clapping? Like, that's one of those things. Is like, it should be basic. You should know you get on a flight and it lands. You don't have to clap because it didn't like. You don't have to.
We
clap.
didn't die. Woo!
Yay! It's the same thing. Police officers. It's like, you shouldn't have to clap when a police officer arrests you and doesn't kill you. It's like, you should just be like, that's your job. That's what you do. Yeah. But another group of people that I can't stand are the UFC fans that go to the bar or watch the UFC fights, and the whole time they're like, yeah, I'm jacked up, but have no idea what they're talking about, and they just yell at the TV. And it's like not even like conscious stuff. It's just like they have no idea what's going on. That's a little aside. Like, I just can't stand
No, it's great, especially hear from somebody like you who actually understands what's going on, to hear how validated I feel knowing that these guys, you know, I'm sitting here, I assume that they don't know what they're talking about. But knowing somebody who actually knows what he's talking about saying that only validates that I'm right. They don't really know what they're talking about. They're just feeling hyped.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. You have so many, like, all of my like actual fighter friends, my jiu-jitsu, my Muay Thai, my MMA fighter friends, and if we watch any fights or do anything, it's mostly like this. It's like
studying, careful.
Oh man, yeah. You see that? Like, you get amped up, but you're like interested in what's going on and the intricacies of what the fight is happening, and you want to hear what the cornermen are saying. You want to hear what things are going on. But there's so many people that if you're yelling at the TV, punch his face, hit him,
screaming
like,
for this is straight gladiators out of Rome screaming for blood stuff we're hearing right now.
Yeah, for sure. So I think you should definitely like feel validated in these people don't know what they're talking about. So that's totally good. So man. So I'm gonna bring this around. So we've gotten in here. Excellent long show today, which is great. Honestly, like let's start.
I'm sorry, I can't. I love it. I love talking.
No, I want to keep going. We got a family Zoom call coming up soon.
Oh, of course, yeah.
We'll get together. We'll do like a group. We should do a weekly group Zoom where all our friends. We'll do this. We'll just discuss stuff and have. We'll see what you guys do in text. We'll do it online. But I want to say thank you again so much for coming on the show today. It's going to be up on Instagram Live soon. There's a part 1 and a part 2. It's all going to be on there. It's going to be on YouTube later. Jason, again, thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us about all the stuff we did today. And it was like went off into right field here and left field, but I feel like we got a pretty solid.
I think so too, but I really appreciate it, honestly. And before I get in trouble, I got to give a shout out to my buddy Mike, because he already mentioned me directly. Yeah, you know Mike. His brother is also an NYPD officer out there, and I'm fairly proud to say that he's one of those good ones out there who's trying to do the right thing. Good. So thank you to him. Thank you for generating this kind of a conversation, honestly, so that way the avenue of thoughts is consistent and we're really engaging, which is what we should be doing a lot more frequently in a more calm, discourse-related manner.
Yeah, support. I appreciate that. Hopefully Mike's brother is all safe and everybody out there is doing okay. Again, sending our love to all the protesters and our love to the police officers. You know, support each other.
To all of them. I don't want anybody to get hurt. Love to everybody, 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, hopefully change happens, and we support everybody and everything. So thank you, Jason. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, brother.
Mimosas in the morning, getting real with y'all. Peace.
Get real. Peace out.